Hey guys, Sebastian back with another video. And today here we are with Lost Hombres, episode 22. And we're here to talk about magic, spirituality, talk about different topics that I think are relevant and important that are going to be helpful in understanding what's going on in today's society, what's going on in ways that we can continue to grow, ways that we can continue to elevate ourselves and there's been a lot of interesting revelations in my life. Actually, that's such a funny word, revelations, because really what revelations are in the realm of divinity is being able to finally understand how the mechanism of humanity is supposed to work. And the more that you start to realize that the answers to the universe are in observing the universe, that once you take the time to stay present, to align yourself, to listen, to connect, to comprehend, that's when everything starts to really come together. Now we're going to talk today about what is the human experience and some things that have been revealing themselves to me. A lot of the information that I have come to have, what you could call esoteric information, or the laws of the universe in type of information. This information for me comes from the process of experiencing life on life's terms and being at the right place at the right time to have those moments of enlightenment. The way the universe works in my mind is that it will reveal itself as necessary dependent on what's happening in someone's life. So whatever is happening in your life, whatever alignment you're finding, whatever you're doing is going to provide you with different outcomes that were part of your journey. And to me, that's part of becoming who we are. An example of that. So let's start with this. Like, I want to talk about the hero's journey and why this is such a popular trope in the realm of existence, in the realm of spirituality. So I like to talk about this idea of Shrek, right? And Shrek has to go through this journey to get his swamp back. So the entire premise of Shrek at the very beginning is that Shrek just wants to get his swamp back. That's like the idea is like, I just want my swamp. And the universe has now put a barrier in his life. So before the swamp situation, he was just a hermit living on his own, just barely just he was just functioning, right? Wasn't really pushing himself, really didn't have a lot of spirit, was just kind of just existing. And he was comfortable, very comfortable in his existence. And the universe put a barrier in front of him and his comfort. And now he has to overcome a challenge to get to his comfort. And so he finally accepts this challenge and says, fine, I'll go figure out this situation with my swamp. I want my swamp back. So he starts the journey in just wanting his swamp back. That's where we start. As you go through this story, all these little pieces start to happen. He meets Donkey. He like gets to the kingdom. He then goes to the next phase where it's like goes to the dragon. All these things happen, right? Meets Fiona. None of that stuff that he had to go through was part of his initial plan. His initial plan at the very beginning was, I just want to get my swamp back. That was it. I just want to get back to my comfort. And in the process of becoming the person that he needed to be to get back to his comfort, he had to overcome all these challenges that came in his way. So now, in order to get his swamp back, he has to essentially allow the universe to take him in a direction in his story. And that's why that's Shrek's story, right? Because that was Shrek's journey to become his hero. He had to go through the hero's journey, right? Now, at the very end, he's back at the swamp. Now, the swamp itself hasn't changed. Like, not in the sense that it's still the swamp. But what has changed is how he is presenting at the swamp. Who he is not the same person that he was when he initially left. So he's back at the same place he started, but he as an individual has gone through a process. We can call this an alchemical process. Like alchemists, people that believe, in the spiritual word and the word of the law and the word of equal exchange, that everything that we go through has a process, right? So that change that Shrek went through was an alchemical process, right? Where he was able to increase his value, increase his spirit, increase his divinity, increase his purpose, all through just the simple effort of actively changing daily. Like in the action of him changing daily, he was able to improve his value, and that was what made his story special. He had to become the Shrek worthy of having that swamp. So he literally had to work on himself to the point so that he could be the one that owned the swamp. He was aligning himself with the universe to become the Shrek that he needed to be so that he could get his swamp back. And he got the best timeline, right? Everything worked out for him because he stayed consistent. He had that faith. He just went with the flow. And that right there is a prime example of what an alchemical process can be like, especially when you're working towards a specific outcome. He had a goal in mind. And every time he went towards that goal, obstacles would present themselves. And he had to overcome all those obstacles to get to the higher goal, right? So these are all part of the journey that he must take to become the hero that he is. And so you can kind of see how, the universe is kind of like a dungeon master for D&D, and it's like, come on, I need you guys to like go that path, like come on, can we just work this way? Can we do this? And so sometimes you're like, hey, can we like just get to the next part? And people just are like, nah. And that's the part about being a good like DM is that you just have to kind of let them go through a journey because the outcome's going to be worth it. Right? But again, if you rush them, it's not the same. Right? Yeah, at some point you're kind of like, okay, come on. But then it's like if I have to keep telling them where to go, it's not that fun. This is not interesting. It's like you're not living the game. Like you're not playing the game in a way where it can flow, right? It's very disruptive. And that's how the universe works out, especially with alignment. So we want to be able to align so that when we're playing in this realm, this game, that everything kind of checks out and aligns because we're living in that moment, we're living in the process, and we're working with the flow, right? We're working with the process so that way it doesn't become a battle or a challenge. So that's something that I've been thinking about lately is that, we have an alchemical process that we go through when we are trying to become the version of ourselves that we really want to become. Right? Again, the possibility of being that person is already within me. I just have to become actively, piece by piece, I have to become the person that I was meant to be. I have to pretty much like load that person into existence. So by actively changing who I am literally updating that process into becoming the person that I want to be. Now, what's interesting is there's two ways to kind of look at this. So when we're thinking about how do I upgrade myself to find the alignment that I want, well, the main thing is there's two main ways that we're going to upgrade our alignment. Number one is you're going to want to program your body in the sense that every day you should be kind of sticking to, some kind of routine, some kind of thing. So the same way you would work out your muscle groups where you keep having to push yourself to some kind of limit just to have that little bit of discomfort, a little bit of like traction. Well, that traction, just as much as you would build calluses, you're going to build muscle by tearing the muscle, filling that gap in with new muscle strength. So that strengthens the muscle. And that means when you're able to flex, you're actually able to withstand more because of the gaps in the muscle groups are now filled in and now they're better, regenerated, strengthened, which at first is going to feel really burned out. But then you get to a point where you're able to lift more muscle in a couple days after it heals, right? And so now you can handle more. So that's how we work out the body, right? That's how we work out the physical, is that we build up the toughness using this three-dimensional world. Now, the mental buildup is going to be more of a metaphysical buildup, right? Where the more we study, we're actually ripping apart the dendrites within the brain. So we're literally ripping our mind apart to make room for new growth, new neurons. So studying actually does burn your brain out. It literally, it's like flexing your brain. And so the more you flex the brain, the more that you're making that space. But there comes a point in that flexing process where you're just like, I'm so fucking tired. I don't care anymore, or whatever. And so you're not able to process any more information. And so once you're not able to process any more information, that's when you're going to get into that weird bind of like, I can't take anymore. I'm not learning. And some people start to shut off. They start to feel like they're never going to learn. They're never going to get it. It's never going to work out. And the problem is they don't understand that that same healing process that was taking place for your muscles, that magical self-healing that you just happen to have in your body, that same process is actually happening in your brain, but you're not able to see it like your muscle groups because you're talking about a metacognitive ability, not a physical ability. And so when I'm able to process harder problems and also like stay with them longer, like understand longer, I'm actually building my strength and stamina in my mind and not just in my muscle groups. And so I want to be able to build both and sustain that, right? Because that's mental gymnastics in a way, where you're not only building stamina in your mind, but you're building also strength. So strength is handling harder problems, and stamina is being able to do it for longer periods of time, which is why I really do think mental gymnastics to some extent is a real thing. And it is possible to actually improve the mind, especially from the standpoint of like, can I do harder problems, harder calculations, right? Can I understand the subconscious and the, super conscious, right? Can I put they bridge the gap together, right? Understanding all the little pieces and how they may fit into a larger, picture, right? How these little tiny pieces are all part of a bigger scheme. So right there, we're able to understand that the mind and body, right? Both of them require some kind of tenacity, right? Some kind of effort so that we are breaking down and also building up. So we want to push ourselves in our mind and in our bodies when we're trying to really achieve a higher version of ourselves. And once we understand that we can do that, there are some factors that come along because now, as much as you can work out in the real world, physically and mentally, right, there is something to be said about the metaphysical world where the real world, there are some, limits to the way the real world operates, right? So as above, so below, or, you know, whatever you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom, or life always has to equal out, right? There's no room for error in the real world. Everything has to be equal. So that's just a fact, right? That's just existence. Always is just existing the way it has to operate. Okay. So when we understand that, right, we have the way we have to kind of like, work with the system, then we get to see our dreams are the places that we get to break that barrier, right? And so this is where it gets interesting because on one hand, you can hack the real world, quote unquote, right? Real world. And in this world, we can start grinding, literally, we grind, right? We work towards building the tenacity, building the insight, the education, the ability to do whatever our heart desires, right? So, like, whatever that feat is in real life, again, if I do the grind, I do the programming here in the real world, eventually I will be able to achieve some of those outcomes, right? Because that's just how it works. Well, once we get really good at understanding frequency, understanding vibes, understanding energy, understanding what dreams really are, understanding like the psyche and all these other things, That's when you get to start using your dreams, your subconscious, to also program the self. And so there's going to be times where you can look at your dream state as almost like a computer or like a video game or something, some kind of like creative tool where you either can, play your own version of a real life video game, right? You can study something, you can create, you can get, deeper esoteric information, you can make connections and bonds that you never would have seen before because you didn't have the possibility to make those connections. And again, maybe even giving the higher power a way to give you visions, or be open to new perspectives. And so these things are really important for helping people understand that there's a bridge between these two sides of themselves, right? So you have you have the dream state where it's that freedom, and you have the real state where there's a more of a grind. But both of them require some sort of ongoing effort, right? Where if you're going to have lucid dreaming, you have to practice and train the brain to be able to maintain lucid dreaming just as much as you have to train the body to be able to do a manual when you're grinding on a skateboard. Some kind of like trick or frequency or some kind of ability that you have to sustain and unlock, but it only happens to those people that have earned that ability, that have earned that moment, right? And so these things come to those people that have earned it. So if you ever want to like understand more how to, control your dreams, or how to manage, like the real world, and how to upgrade yourself, then you have to be able to apply the tools of self-development in both worlds, right? Right, both in the real world, I have to be able to apply, like, hey, I can manipulate reality to my will, but in the sense where I'm helping the physical body and this present reality. And then one where I can lift the veil of existence and also have a lot of power in the creative world, where I can create like almost like a supercomputer, where I can make calculations and talk to things and do things that my mind could only ever imagine, which is exactly what we're doing, but we're doing imagination with purpose, right? So we're able to manipulate reality at a subconscious level because we are able to manipulate our purpose. Now, why is that important? Why is it important to be able to manipulate the fabric of reality in your mind? Well, one of the big reasons is it really does help explain, or at least justify and solidify, better expand on some of the challenges that humans face, right? Like it's important to understand that as human beings, when we understand that we can upgrade these things or change these things, that we have a lot of power to be able to alter our realities, to be able to upgrade our realities, to be able to get more out of life, right? And so we have a lot of responsibility in the sense that we are the ones that are going to be reprogramming ourselves to find our highest form of self, right? We're going to be programming ourselves into existence. And again, if that means in the physical realm, we're doing in something, or if we're doing it on, the spiritual realm, we're in there programming ourselves into a certain existence. But it takes that practice. It takes the trust. It takes having patience. Just like knowing that if I keep doing a handstand, I'll be able to walk on my hands. Right? I gotta trust the process. I have to know that this is gonna work out, right? And that my mind is the one that can create. And so one of the fun facts about the mind is that everything that you see that's physically in existence that was made by a human being was first made up in their mind before it could exist in reality. So our realities are limited to the stuff that we can imagine with our mind. So if we can't imagine it, we can't create it. Now, God is a different thing. The universe is a different thing. The universe has laws that govern its reality. Ours break that reality a little bit. That's why we can go to dreamland and also create just as much as God can. God gives us the ability to create anything theoretically over, like, we could technically build anything, but just as much as we know we could build to anything, we also have to remember that everything has already come from something, right? So it's a little bit of a mix, right? So it's like a math equation, right? It's like the process of alchemy is you have to destroy to create. You have to destroy to create. You have to destroy to create. And there's a process, and it's like The star creates and the black hole eats. And this process, this ongoing pressure, is a frequency, is a wave, which allows existence to live on a spectrum, right? Because it's a wave, right? There's the high and the lows, and there's the probabilities. And so the second you have wavelengths, you allow for probability to exist, and you allow for that circular, keep going kind of motion to happen, but also a wave over time, right? So they both apply. So you have the circle, which is like the ability to reconnect with the self. And then you have the flow over time, which shows you like, hey, over time, day and night, people are going to be going through their own process, right? They're going to be going through like their own programming and their own need to change. So yeah, we can hack ourselves, right? We can be able to manipulate reality. And the reality is that before anything can exist, like I said, it has to come from the mind. So in a lot of ways, that makes the mind a lot more real than actual real life. Because again, if something cannot exist if it didn't come from the mind, then is it really real at that point, right? And it is real to the sense that it exists here in the physical. But again, what is the physical realm if it can't exist in the mind? So it needs to be able to exist in the mind to be able to give it that power to exist in the physical. And they work in tangent together, right? So all human nature in general, all humanity, when we talk about the conscious state, is a collective conscious. Why? Because that's the most real place that we can exist. Because again, our thoughts come from there. So whatever that subconscious area is that we have to make up our mind to create it, that thing is the most real place you can ever exist, because that's the place that all human beings share. We have a shared intranet. We have a shared space in our own reality. And that space and reality allows us to, again, change things, right? We get to manipulate reality, okay? We get to make differences. We get to actively, put our energy into something, and we get to do our own alchemical process, right? Developing self, developing value, working on assessing, my needs and reprogramming myself, whether again it's in the conscious world or the subconscious world, to gain enlightenment, right? Now, why is that important? Because a lot of people are not turned on. A lot of people are just not getting it, right? A lot of people don't understand how to appreciate their frequencies, right? Something that came up recently that I thought was a good kind of thing to think about too is how people are humans. And hue is a set of frequencies, and it's light, right? So like light is a hue. And the reason why we have light is because we have the different stages of existence and chakra, the different beta waves, data waves, all these different types of waves that exist. And the lower frequency waves, the ones that are more about survival, and the higher frequency waves, right, are the more for thoughts. So when we keep people at low frequencies, we're actually talking about their low chakra states, right? We're talking about survival, primal need, talking about sexual need, right? Then we have like willpower, right? I can do it. And then we have our heart chakra. That's like love and belonging. And then we have our throat chakra. That's communication. Then we have our mind chakras. That's like our intuition, our creativity. And then we have our spiritual chakra, like our third eye chakra, right? The one that connects to the all-seeing eye. Now, what's interesting about the all-seeing eye area is that this spot right here is also where your prefrontal cortex finishes. So it's like another way of telling us, hey, we know this is where your prefrontal cortex goes. We know this is the spot where you open up the eye. And that's why at 25, everyone kind of goes through some like experience. They're like, whoa, dude, my parents did actually care. No, no, no. That's because they're having that third eye open up, and reality is starting to make a lot more sense to them, because they're able to see things they never saw before, because their brain's fully able to process these things and actually like agree with some of the things that they have been experiencing. So they finally are ready to kind of like, oh, that's how it works, or oh, my brain finally like, gave it to me, the information. So yeah, like, people again gotta make sure that they're taking care of their energy, taking care of the way they're existing, not giving away that power to other people. And we want to go through our own, again, alchemical process by taking accountability and seeing where we can change and where we can be a better people, and not just allow everybody else to affect our programming, but ultimately remember that I can change my programming. I can do better. I can always be the example, and then taking that power back and then sustaining it. And that's showing people too that you are different, right? That you are changed. When people try to call you, I'm like, oh, you're never going to change, blah, blah, blah. Let them, let them go through that process. Let them go through that anguish and that anger, because that's just helping support what? Those are the battles that you need to have if you want to become the person that you need to be. Then, hey, guess what? Every challenge you're going to face, that's one you deserve. And again, it may not seem fair, but what is fairness when you're trying to get an outcome that you want? Some things are going to be a lot easier, then some things are going to be a lot harder, and it's a mix of everything. And that's why life is rewarding to those that are willing to put in the work to get that reward, right? It's very grindy. It's very just matter of fact. And that's why dreams are awesome, because you get to go to creative mode and do whatever you want there. So again, dream state allows whatever, and reality, it's a lot more limiting. But that's why, again, we enjoy dreams, because it breaks that fourth wall, right? Gives you that power. And if we learn how to use that, we can keep advancing ourselves and even put ourselves in situations like, oh, I never would have thought of that. Well, yeah, because you're supposed to use your brain to like be like your computer, like its personal computer, like render things into reality. Now, the question really comes down to this. If you are having imagination, then is it real in the sense that it exists somewhere? Because one of the things that's interesting is you can only be at one place at one time, right? And so if you're having a nightmare or you're imagining something else, like you still are putting your consciousness in that environment where it's at, and it's taking out of the present, right? And so that is still affecting, because you can only be at one place at one time, right? So even if you're with somebody and you keep putting yourself somewhere else, you're actually taking away, the experience from both people, and you're losing your grip on reality, right? So you want to be careful, like where you're putting your energy, because if you put it away for too much, then you're really losing like all the credibility you have for being in the present, right? And so those are some things that are important to think about, especially when we're trying to understand the spirit. We're understanding like what value is and how to sustain it, and how to like keep out for yourselves and make sure that you guys are preparing yourself mentally, physically, and having your heart in the right place. Okay, so let's talk about some other things when it comes to concepts I've learned recently, and there's we'll revisit things as we come and they go. But one of the things that really came to me recently was I was thinking about how the planets, specifically the sun and the moon, and how they relate a lot. Not the moon, the sun and the earth, right? Yeah. So how the sun and the earth are very much related to like the cycle of life, in the sense that the sun is the provider and the moon is or not the moon, the earth is the receiver. And so what happens is the earth is, setting itself up, creating, and then like all of a sudden a comet or something hits the planet, and then it makes a moon, right? So we have the sun, and then we have the earth, which is going to be now the mother Gaia. So you have mother Gaia and the sun, right? And now Gaia gets hit by a rock and it breaks it up, and that little rock ends up becoming a moon, which is like their daughter, right? So the universe really had like a daughter there. So there's like the father, the mother, and then the daughter. And the daughter just keeps the water going, right? Keeps the flow going, keeps everything, but also somewhere for the sun to kind of like light up, right? So it's like you have like the father, the mother, and the daughter, and then we are the sun, right? We are the children. And so what does that mean? That means Gaia, right, is helping the sun create an environment that can be received by that light and encourages the light to grow, right? Because without light, we wouldn't be able to survive because nothing could grow. We wouldn't have seasons. It would just be everything would just cease to exist. We wouldn't be able to get around, right? We have to have light to be able to see around. So we need these things. We need them. We need them around. So yeah, we want to make sure that we are taking care of our duality. We're taking care of the two sides because again, there's the sun that's the provider and the moon that's the receiver, right? And that's why you get something like plants. Okay, and why are plants important? Well, if we think about plants, right, they are like one of the first life forms that existed on the planet, and they even terraformed the planet to give us oxygen, right? So they were terraforming the planet and they're much more likely connected to the earth, right? Because what are vegetables? Like what are fruits? What are these things? They're trees that grew from the earth, right? They grew with the earth. So they're using that process, that nourishment from the earth. And then what happens, right? They have all these different things like earth, water, wind, plasma, fire, right? Plasma. And so they're growing. And so they're much just like us, right? They even look very similar to us. They have trunks. We have trunks. They have arms. We have arms. They have leaves. We have leaves. We have roots. We even say our family tree, our family roots. We eat the fruit and we poop out the fertilizer, so it makes sense. They gave us shade, they gave us water, right? So there's some kind of dynamic there. And yeah, we've been our ancestors were probably trees because again, we are very similar to their look, right? They have the sun, we have the our heart, they have carbon dioxide, we have air, right? So like super similar. We even talk about, like I said, our family tree and stuff. So we have similarities already. So just little things like that where you can see that we are a lot more connected to this world than we believe so, right? Even the trees, again, are our ancestors to some extent. But it's hard for people to have that insight and knowledge because of the amount of, propaganda and negative feedback that are out there. It's hard. It's hard to find that healing in somebody, in ourselves, because people can be very draining to us the second we start to engage with them or get around them, right? So yeah, our trees are our ancestors, right? They're part of us. So it's important to kind of like again take the time to sit back and just like mesmerize in the universe, mesmerize in the things around you, because that'll get you out of the 3D realm, right? So the 3D realm is again safety, love, belonging, like all the basics, like very like what's the house you're gonna get, like next thing you're gonna buy, blah blah blah, all commodity stuff, all in that negative zone, right? And so people don't know how to appreciate you know enlightenment anymore. They don't even know what that means, right? So if we go up from the top, there's a point in our development where we really don't have any more growth to do, like not physically at least. And so that's when that other growth starts to happen. Just like there's a point in a plant's life where it's no longer a sapling, but it actually is more like a tree, right? And so it reaches a point where that maturity starts to actually be part of its growth, So that's like us at some point. We have to follow that process, and then understand that when we get to that process, we also need support, right? We need support in our own growth too. So it's important to know where they're at in their development so that we can be successful and understand that hey, when I'm trying to be the best person I can be, and when I'm trying to elevate myself, I need to make sure that I can be accountable, that I can understand the process of self, that I can say, hey, I'm taking care of my own energy, my own needs, so that you can, come out ahead and understand that hey, I have the power in me to change my reality, right? Just as much as like we were saying earlier, Neo and the Matrix, where you can change here and you can change there, right? Because they're intertwined at the end of the day, right? These are intertwined worlds. And one of the things I recently was talking to somebody about, you see this a lot in this world, is that people will keep repeating the same mistakes over and over. And these people get stuck in loops and loops and endless loops, and they will blame everybody for their problems. And that's the thing. They get in loops. They it's something that I thought of recently. I thought was interesting. It's this idea that people that are in the light don't like to be in the dark, right? They don't want to go in the dark. But people that are in the dark don't want to get in the light. Like if you're already in the dark, nobody wants to turn the light on. If you're already in the light, nobody wants to go in the dark. And so there's this phenomenon that you see where it's that threshold into existence. It's that threshold into being that bad person that you don't want to be anymore, into that person that you want to be, that open person, right? So as long as you stay in that dark, it's going to be really hard for you to adjust to going in the light. That's just how it works, right? Again, people that are already in the dark, already in that negative headspace, are going to continue to perpetuate being in that negative headspace until they what? Decide, hey, it's time to make a change here, right? And so, yeah, like, it's important to pay attention to what can happen to people when they don't, stay focused and keep themselves on track. I also believe that it's important to follow your gut, or not follow your gut, trust your gut, follow your heart, and focus your mind. Right, so that's something that I don't see a lot of people doing either. Is that they've lost the touch with like what it means to like regulate yourself, right? So like you want to follow your gut. Why? Because when you don't follow your gut, what happens? You argue with yourself, things don't go as well. Like you're literally not able to connect with what's happening with the world around you, right? It makes you scared. It makes you like low frequency. It makes you, again, overly present. And your heart, you want to follow it because that's the organ that pumps you up, right? That's the one that gets you going. That's the one that makes you feel like, hey, I can move, I can groove. And so it elevates you, right? And then your mind helps you get things done because it what? It helps you like put all the thoughts into something and then can just get that done. And that's why it's important to trust your gut. Why? Because your gut's telling you, hey, that's good, that's not, this is what's really happening. You need to follow your heart because your heart pumps, and that pump is what's really getting you going, right? It gets you pumped literally. And focus is super important too, because how are you supposed to accomplish anything if you're unable to focus, right? So it's important that you are able to focus down, get things done so that you can keep powering through and, feel empowered while you're in the process of finding yourself, right? So we want to make sure that those things are being addressed. But yeah, it's been a interesting last couple weeks just because again I've been kind of like having some revelations about life and things like that, and just like even the like I said earlier, the different cells. Like I even had this revelation that there are three types of mental health disorders. And they're important to understand because they're going to give you insight on like what to address as like you struggle. And the first one is going to be feeling disorders. So feeling disorders are disorders that affect, the body. And so depression, right? You could say like bipolar disorder, like things that affect the body, keep you low frequency. Those are going to be on one end. The second type of disorders is you're going to see ego disorders. And ego disorders are the ones where your personality took a hit and it's just bringing you down, bothering you, and it's just and draining you, right? And so the last disorder is cognitive. And cognitive disorders are, for example, like ADHD or stress or those things. The borderline and narcissist would be like ego disorders. But yeah, the mind disorders like ADHD and like and generalized anxiety disorder, things like that, stress mechanisms. So that's kind of like an idea of like what's going on. It's like, is it my body that's having problems? Is it my ego? Am I unlovable? It's having problems? Am I worried? Is that why I'm having problems? So it helps give people like a base of like where are my issues, right? So it's good to have that stability because again, like if you have that stability, then you can call people and be like, hey, like this is what's happening. And then you can kind of help people and guide them and help them get through the process. But yeah, you want to break it down to those three things. So feelings, personality, or is it thoughts, right? And they're different. Feelings are going to be very different than how you deal with personality, right? Or how you deal with your cognitive functioning. So they're all different things, and they all have their own important role. And so it's not about being the best at everything. It's about being good at what you are good at, and just being aware of those things and sticking to those things. But yeah, a couple other things about like magic and energy and things like that. It's really important that you understand the power of being honest, being truthful, being consistent, the power that one has in being able to alter your reality, to manifest things, to get the things that you want from your world and your alignment. And it really comes down to, again, being authentic, being real, right? Presenting yourself in the right manner. One thing I see a lot in the people around me is the more that they're just upfront about things, the more that they trust their gut, the more that they use their mind to focus and get things done, the better the outcomes come out for them, right? They're able to really hone in on just following the moment and not questioning it, because the second you start to question it, that's when life starts to go downhill, right? Because you're meant to just get that flow state going, right? You're meant to just follow that until it plays out, right? But also you gotta, call people out. If people are, making you uncomfortable, if people aren't aligning, it's important that you call them out. I said this recently in one of my TikToks, but it's important that you look at the three stages, right? So it's are the three things, like you have pain. Pain is abnormal. Pain is something that you need to get checked out. So you don't want to be in pain. There's discomfort, and discomfort's like getting a shot, and you're just having to deal with that discomfort while you're getting the shot. But it's gonna be over, so you're just like, fuck, I'll just like deal with it. And so that's what that can look like when you're dealing with the shot, and then you get through it. That's discomfort. And then pain is the fact that there's something that you can do to work through this problem, but instead you just kind of like say fuck it, and then you're like, ugh. And so that pain that you go through is a discomfort because there's an outcome in the end, right? And suffering means that there's an outcome, there's a way, but you'd rather just what? Sit with it, let it eat you up. And that's suffering. And how many times do people just sit there for years allowing themselves to suffer, allowing themselves to be in a negative headspace, allowing themselves to feel drained, it's just how some people might be, right? And until you're ready to confront those things, you will continue having those issues, right? Being brought down, feeling overwhelmed, feeling drained, feeling tired, right? From not being able to focus and get these things done and organize ourselves, right? Now, let's talk some more about, divinity and magic and some of these things. And what I really like to do and I like to think about is when I'm out there helping people, when I'm out there showing them how to operate some of these things, it's nice being able to share this light with others, because what that does for us is that helps us also continue to share our light, right? And so I don't see this information as something that they can use against me. I see it as something that can provide enlightenment for both of us, right? So being able to understand the deeper insights of magic and the beauty of the universe and the quality of the universe and the power of the universe and everything that comes along with it, it's way better appreciated when you are able to share with other people. It's something I was talking to somebody about recently. And when you start changing, right, it really messes with like the demonic, the shadow energy, the archonic energy, whatever you want to call it, right? Whatever you want to call these things, the leeches, energy vampires, they don't seem to enjoy those comments, the reality, right? And when you're first changing, they will even make comments about how, oh, you think you're so this, you think like even like, oh, you think you're so smart now or whatever. Oh, you just think and so they even say like positive, negative, right? And what you want to learn is when you can work with those positive negatives, that starts disrupting their system, right? So like once you learn how to like operate that, they're gonna calm down, they're gonna stop doing that, and then you're taking back your power. So just working with people that can be challenging, and being able to kind of work with them work with the process. What is what's going to be the thing that gives you the most advantage, especially in your process, in your creation, and what you're doing. So you want to make sure, yeah, you align your goals and values, and get those things straight, and really understand like what you want, because again, that's how manifestation comes into play. If I want my things to align, if I want to be able to program myself into existence, I need to make sure that my goals are very clear so that my heart can start to show me the way of how I'm going to achieve my ultimate goal, right? That self actualization, that final step of achieving. Now, one thing that I find interesting that I think is another thing that I'm going to tell you guys about is about the human factor, right? So, what is human? Well, a hue is a type of frequency that exists, and it's mainly in light. But if we can accept that human beings are a frequency of light, which is again what light really is, right? Light matter is light bent over and things like that, right? So we theoretically already come from a type of light, right? So like we are a hue in some way. Now, what's interesting about hues is that again, it's a type of frequency. Now, if you take that same concept of like what a human is and you apply the frequency to a human, you start to realize that everything in a human being is like a bell curve, right? Everything has an up and a down, right? There's like a balance of like what's too much and too little. And that's literally the existence of human beings. And there's this process of like every day, like, hey, how much are we regulating this? How much blood pressure? How much blood sugar? How much? So you're going through these, cycles, but in space and time, those cycles actually go up and down. They don't actually go in a circle, right? They're actually going up and down because that's how time is flowing, right? But we see it as a regulation, while time sees it as this kind of regulation, right? And so we're actually experiencing a whole different setup because of the way we are moving through time. And so when you accept that you're a hue, you have all these different parts of you that go up and down, whether it's height, eye color, right? Personality, whatever, energy, willpower. All these things are measurable. And that's why it gets even more interesting, because when we look at chakra states and we look at what is existence at about the first, like, because then you have like, survival, sex, self-care, like willpower, desire, then we have love, then we have communication, and then we have enlightenment, like thinking and stuff, and then enlightenment. And so you have all these layers, and each one of those layers has a different energy, right? So maybe it's like, survival, right? Or maybe it's belonging, or maybe it's giving. And so each one of those is a frequency where I can only give so much in a day. I can only receive so much in a day, right? I can only communicate so much in a day. I can only like look for my basic needs so long in a day. So like all these different things that you can see coming from, the things they can't do in a day, right? Those things are all going to be part of, what makes them into the people they're going to be, right? Because they have to learn from this process, right? So that's really what it comes down to, is that people want to have to go through like the process to become the best version of themselves, and they got to understand these chakras are part of that process. Like the more that you can accept that these chakras are part of you, part of your frequency, part of your energy, the better you're going to be able to understand why you're off some days, right? So like for example, love, right? Love is a physical thing because you can feel love, like especially when you're in love with somebody. But it's also like a metaphysical thing, because like how do you express it? Like I feel a lot of love for you. Okay, well, what is love? Like what is it? Like where is it? Or like where is the need for safety? Like where is that? And the best I can say, it's a type of bell curve, right? So it's a type of frequency. Like too much is, and then not enough, and you're gonna have to what? Keep bouncing, just like the muscle group, right? You can't keep in that high circuit. You're going to have to do the opposite at some point, because that's how humans work. We are always on the opposite. So whenever we go up, we have to go down. So if I'm working my ass off all day, I'm going to have to what? Fucking chill. If I'm getting angry, I'm going to have to cool off, right? So whatever the process is, we're always going through a hue. We're always going through a frequency. We're always going through a change. And so that change is what's going to allow us, to stay balanced, to stay grounded, to develop value, to become like the alchemist, right? And go through my own story, my own journey of how I can be a better version of me, even though I'm starting here. So in a way, I'm already going through that process, right? So the first podcast I was here, the first day that I showed up, that was already the beginning of a new journey, right? That was already the beginning of seeing where my growth would go and what I was to become and what I was going to learn about the universe, right? So I'll go back to a couple of things when it comes to magic and things like that. So, like I said earlier, the Earth is like the mother, the sun is the father, the moon is the child, and you can even see like the way it works too, where you work your ass off all day, you bloom like this, like the flowers, and you collect the sun just like you have to with vitamin D and all this stuff, and it empowers you. And then you go and you reflect on the night because that's what the moon was for. The moon was for the sun to hit it and it reflected us because we're supposed to reflect on the day that just passed, right? And so we want to bust our ass and then we want to shake our ass, and that's literally the definition of like what we would need, to be able to be successful. Is that we want to be able to bust it and then shake it, right? Really make the best of, our circumstances and make the best of what we have in front of us, and take it day by day, and really understand, the benefits of being in charge of oneself, and, being in charge of developing healthy coping mechanisms, and how to have like powerful conversations that can empower me to be, a more enlightened person, and more aware. And one of the things about esoteric insight is that be a you have to allow yourself to be in positions where you're going to be able to learn, right? So this just includes studying. So we want to be able to study information. We want to be able to, find things that, enlighten us and help us see truths and realities. So we want to expand our mind, but we also want to do it in different mediums, different ways to really allow ourselves to understand the greater good. And this is where the subconscious, conscious, and superconscious comes in, right? So the subconscious is going to be there connecting all these little tiny dots, like your brain's like, right? Now the consciousness means you're aware of the current moment, and then the super conscious means like you're making the greater connection, like you're seeing all these things connect. And so you want to operate all three of those the best you can by trying to be in the conscious state as much as you can, right? Yeah, recognize these things, see that they're there, but you want to mainly be in your conscious state because again, that's where most of your power is going to be from, right? Most of what your abilities are going to be from are from, again, what you've been investing in yourself and what you've been doing, right? So that's just another thing about, yeah, the system, things that are going on right now, and like, what's really happening is that if you look at the chakra states, a lot of propaganda, a lot of the stuff that people are seeing are on those lower chakra energies. And the problem is that thinking is difficult and it's easier just to assume. And so a lot of people are just in the assumption land right now because it's so difficult to actually find some kind of balance within oneself, especially with the certain circumstances that you see happening, all over, right? Most people aren't equipped to handle emotional regulation. Most people don't have the programming necessary to be healthier people, right? And so it can be a challenge. It can be difficult because a lot of people will make up that excuse like, oh, I did. Da, 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 da. If people continue to make up a reason why they're never going to be able to change, I'm willing to bet you they're not going to change. Because the power of the mind is super important. If the mind doesn't want to change, it will not change. You cannot make up their mind, right? Once they have decided that's it, that's it. There's nothing you can do. And so you want to make sure that you're doing the best you can to ensure your outcomes, ensure nothing's going to happen, right? So you want to work on yourself, work on that process, and work on trusting yourself so that you can keep yourself in the best position. Something else I thought was funny that makes me think of like spirituality and things like that is like the Avatar: The Last Airbender. And so if you think about Yang, Yang is like a high level, like monk or priest or divinity holder, right? So he can hold all the elements because the elements are the four and the spirit, right? So we have earth, water, wind, fire, which are the four elements that create humanity on top of spirit, right? But not even fire. I like to call it plasma. I don't think fire is the right word, but that's just the primitive word that we use. Like, oh, that's the closest thing we can think of. It's the lightning, right? But yeah, we we come from an interesting, world where we have to be always kind of on the lookout for keeping up, with our necessities and keeping up with life and keeping up with what we need to do, and being able to be present and be able to put yourself and all these barriers that come. But when you finally are able to lock in, when you finally are able to wield this magic, what you realize is that nobody has the power to push you down because you have the force of the universe on your side. And I like to tell people, what is the weight of the world when you have the force of the universe within you? What does that mean? Well, you have a layer of divinity that can hold people accountable to a higher standard. And when they don't want to meet that standard, you get to hold that against them. And that bothers them. They don't want to be those people. They want to make changes. They want to be better. And we have to utilize that space and time, right? It can be difficult. People don't want to give you space and time. People don't want to recognize that, hey, you're asking for something. They want to demand that, whatever it may be. And yeah, people forget to be humble. And that's another thing that you see a lot, is that materialism that people are stuck in. They forget to be humble. It's hard to appreciate the beauty of the universe when you're still thinking you're in survival, which again is like the lowest state of existence, is just material. It's just the basic form. It's the lack of enlightenment. It's the physical right now needs. And so as long as we have those, like they say, those fleshly desires, it's going to be very hard to enlighten oneself. And that's why famously said it was that most people just assume, they don't actually do the work behind it, because that would actually require thinking. And as I said earlier, like, thinking is difficult for people. Like, it takes years of experience, it takes studying, it takes a lot of fine tuning to, build the mind that can withstand challenges and, understand difficulties and have that fortitude, you could say. And so yeah, it's all part of the bigger picture, right? All these things. I even say in Billard, right? Like, if you're watching pool or whatever, they gotta, like, in order to figure out how to win and calculate everything, you have to first make that big, hit. You have to first mix everything or break everything apart so that you can sit back, think about it, make a plan, and then actually successfully, play a game where you're just diving in, getting it started, and then making all the right connections so that you can enjoy and sustain and know that sometimes it's the beginning's a little messy. The beginning stages of a relationship, of a friendship, of an understanding can be difficult. But if you give it that patience, you give it that space time, things will work out. And you want to see how divine the world is? It's this divine that anytime you get a cut, an injury, something, even something major, right? You and I both know that if you go and rest, the universe is going to take care of you. The universe is going to heal that. It wants you to be put together. It wants you to work. It wants you to the best that it can, right? And again, that process takes space and time. So even if you wanted to do it, even if you wanted to happen today, you wouldn't be able to make that happen. You have to make the space and time. And so we want to respect that space and time anytime we're trying to remember, how do we access our divinity? How do we improve ourselves? How do we get to a better place in our life? And that's how we're going to do it. We're going to access our divinity. We're going to put ourselves in the present. We're going to actively make that change every day. And we're going to remember that we're just an amalgamation of a bunch of frequencies. And as long as we stay in that really good alignment, as long as we stay in that really good center point, then everything will just fall in place. So don't push too hard. Don't fight too hard. Just go with the flow. Let things happen. If things fall apart for a moment, just watch it, because you never know. There could have been something else that could happen, and you might have missed the opportunity if you didn't what. let it happen and go with the flow. So remember, the universe or God will send you lots of signals, and you just have to be ready to pick up on those and let life take you. All right, guys, it's been a pleasure. I'll see you guys on the next one. And remember, don't forget to hack that body, hack that brain, and upgrade your state of existence. Later.